Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome officials from the Auditor General's Department who are here with us today, together with the members of this team from the Public Accounts Committee. And we will introduce members in a moment. I also wish to welcome the members of the Ministry of Public Administration, which is the oversight ministry for the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. I want to welcome members of the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, and of course, members of the media and members of the public who are present. My name is Boindradat Tiwari. I'm the chair of the Public Accounts Committee. And the purpose of this meeting of the Public Accounts Committee is to examine the audited financial statements of the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, TATT. And we are covering here the years 2010 to 2016. We as a committee are desirous of hearing the challenges being faced by the key stakeholders at the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago in an attempt to determine some of the possible solutions to these challenges. So we will ask questions and engage you on some of the issues that have come before us. And the whole purpose of this is to help TATT improve its delivery of services in an efficient, effective, and economic manner. This meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament Channel 11 and on Radio 105.5 FM and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can therefore send their comments related to today's topic via email, parl101@ttparliament.org, parl101@ttparliament.org. They can send it through Facebook, facebook.com/ttparliament, and of course on Twitter @ttparliament. I'm going to ask the members of this committee, Public Accounts Committee, starting with Senator Henry, if they would introduce themselves.
Morning, everyone. That's Henry, member.
Good morning, everyone. Taharko Bika, member. Vice Chairman, apologies.
Morning. My name is Shari Sipasad. I'm a member.
Good morning. Paula Gopi School, member.
Okay, thank you very much. And I will also ask the members of the Auditor General's Department if they would introduce themselves.
Good morning, all. Shiva Sananan, Assistant Auditor General.
Good morning. Desmond Noel, Audit Director, Acting Assistant Auditor General.
Good morning. Florence Dialsing, Audit Senior, Acting Assistant Audit Director.
Okay, and members here present from the Ministry and TATT, I shall be grateful if you'd introduce yourselves so that the public and ourselves will be familiar with the people who are before us. Permanent Secretary.
Good morning, Chair and members. Joan Mendez, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Public Administration.
Good morning, Chair and members. Claudel McKellar, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Public Administration.
Good morning, Chair and members. Abigail Bino, Manager, Policy, Strategy and Monitoring, Ministry of Public Administration.
Yes, go ahead.
Good morning, members. John Prince, CEO or Chief Executive Officer, Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago.
Good morning, Chair and members. Cynthia Reddock-Downs, Executive Officer for Finance and Accounting at TATT.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. Carol Douglas, Legal and Enforcement Manager and Corporate Secretary.
Good morning, Chair and members. Kirk Sukram, Executive Officer, Technology and Engineering at the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay, well, good morning again to all of you. Thank you for coming. We're very happy that you are here. We have some questions for you based on the various reports that we've received, and we thank you for the responses to the initial questions that were sent. I wonder if the Permanent Secretary, do you have a statement to make before? Yes, okay.
Thank you, Chair. Good day to all members and members of my executive team. I'm pleased to attend this meeting this morning along with the executive team of the Telecommunications Authority. The Ministry of Public Administration's mandate includes responsibility for national ICT. Within this area, the Ministry has oversight for the statutory body, the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, which was established in 2004, and who are the regulators of the telecommunications and broadcasting sectors in Trinidad and Tobago. The Ministry's oversight is primarily aligned to the Telecommunications Act. And of course, the Ministry observes all relevant policy and regulations, including the Exchequer and Audit Act, in carrying out its oversight responsibility. Thank you.
I noticed that members of the board are not here. And I just wanted to ask if it was a decision that the management would come, the CEO and the members of the management.
Chairman, I wish I can answer you that question definitively. But to be honest with you, Chairman, any answer I give you would not be an answer because, Chairman, I don't know.
Okay, I appreciate your straightforwardness. Do you have a statement to make as a CEO? Okay.
I'll be making a statement from my head.
Okay.
Notwithstanding a brain surgery a few months ago, right? Where doctor said, okay, so, right. Chairman, the Telecommunication Authority was born in 2004. To be precise, the 1st of June, 2004. And anybody who was an adult or alive at that time knew at that time we had a market which was a monopoly. Anybody would remember that market. Chairman, you may recall, fixed line, one provider. Mobile, one provider. Internet, one provider, right? Even FM broadcasters, we didn't have many providers at that time. So the objective of the setting up the Telecommunication Authority, which, Chairman, is a statutory body, all right? The objective was to open the market. We became one of the early subscribers to the WTO, to the GATS, and saying that we are committed to open the market in Trinidad and Tobago. Early, we were among the first 60 members around the world that signed on to the GATS, which is the General Agreement on Tariff in Services.
What year was that?
Huh?
What year was that?
That was around 96. Yeah, that was around 96. We signed on to the GATS and promised that we're going to open the market. And let me just say a little bit about the GATS. Chairman, it is a very precise piece of legislation. If we do not do what the GATS prescribe, they can take action against any product that we have. Any other action they can take. So we signed on and we said we're going to open the market. We held discussions with TSTT then. TSTT had a monopoly until 2009. And TSTT agreed that, they're going to participate in the opening of the market. And the market became open in 2004, right? So the basic objectives of the Act was establishing conditions for open market, including conditions for fair competition, because we had to have that. Facilitating the other development of a telecommunication system that serves to safeguard, enrich, and strengthen the national, social, cultural, and economic well-being of society. And Chairman, this one here is one that is bothering us even now. Because we're even getting calls, they say, yeah, promoting and protecting the interests of consumers. So we are being asked, given what is happening now, is the authority protecting the interests of consumers? We're looking at it, Chairman. We're looking at it very, 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 very closely. And we're not jumping to action. As the old folks say, measure twice, cut once, right? So we want to really, really, really look at this thing before we take any action, or before we decide not to take any action, right? One of the other tenets of the Act was to promote universal access to service by all persons in Trinidad and Tobago. Chairman, and this is where government minister come in, because what we're supposed to do is to get service providers to provide telecommunication service in the most rural areas of Trinidad and Tobago in the same manner that it is provided in Port of Spain, right? That has been a challenge, Chairman. It has been really, really, really a challenge. Then they gave us the responsibility to regulate the broadcasting services of Trinidad and Tobago. Since the passage of the Act, the industry has grown exponentially, right? We moved from one mobile provider to 2 mobile providers, and hoping soon to move to 3 mobile providers. We have 5 fixed line providers in Trinidad and Tobago, which is one of the best kept secret. It's no longer TSTT and Flow. We have 5 of them. We have 10 internet providers in Trinidad and Tobago. 6 free-to-air television broadcasters we have now. We have 10 broadcasters via cable, and another 10 via cable and satellite. And, Chairman, this data may interest you. We have 37 FM radio stations, 37 FM radio stations. So, and that is a challenge for us to regulate 37 FM stations because, Chairman, you know, we are talk show, right? So we have to listen. We have to listen to those 37 stations all day to make sure that they remain within the license that they sign. Because telecommunication, we order two things. If you're only using spectrum, you only need a license. But once you are providing service to the public, you need a concession also. So therefore, but while the authority is authorized by the Act to grant licenses, Cabinet is the entity that grants concession. Chairman, you asked about our challenges. We face a mounting of a challenge right now in that we have not been able to get authorization to give out the 700 spectrum, which is to do 4G LTE. So we're even falling behind countries of the Caribbean. We've fallen behind countries of the Caribbean by not giving that spectrum. I'm sure you all will have your phones. If you had a 3G and somebody send you a video, you take a little while, a minute or more, to prolong this video. For GLTE, you would have prolonged that video immediately. It also, by not getting an authorization to give out that spectrum, it also ties our hand in terms of making money to send to the consolidated fund. You know, we have been sending money to the consolidated fund. Last year, we sent 40 million. This year, come January, Chairman, we're pleased to announce we're going to send 37 million to the consolidated fund. And we feel if we get to do for GLTE, the following year, we could send $50 million to the consolidated fund to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. This is what we feel in terms of that. So something has to be done to give us authorization to use the 700 spectrum to grant service providers so that they, you know, what we feel, I must say, Chairman, we have a fear that one of those service providers will take us before the WTO. Because it is stated in the GATS, if you have spectrum and the service provider wants spectrum, we are obliged to provide the spectrum, or else we put the entire country in jeopardy because they could take, you know, for anything that they can do to take us. So that is our biggest challenge at the moment, Chairman.
Well, I thank you for your statement, and we will ask some questions now. I thank you for your statement, and we'll ask some questions now. I'll begin by asking some general questions, and then I will go around the table, and members of the committee will ask questions. But before I do so, I want to say that I'm disappointed that the board is not represented here today. We cannot be a public accounts committee and have the permanent secretary of a ministry come before the public accounts committee to basically to exercise her jurisdiction over the state entity, in this particular case, TATT, as the ministry in charge, and then have the management when the board is the institution between the ministry and the institution. The board is appointed there for a purpose, and they have jurisdictional authority over this institution. The management and staff work for the institution, and the governance of the institution is the responsibility of the board. And I am very disappointed that the board is not here present, and I feel that they should be here. Often, a good board will come, represent themselves properly, and have management support them. And that is the standard I expect from these state entities. So I simply register that, and I proceed.
Chairman, may I just intervene? I do believe that there might be a new board, or perhaps their letters of instrument may not have been granted as yet. I don't know as yet. I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
But I know that there's some transition with the board. Can anybody confirm? The PS, perhaps?
There is certainly a new board, and they have already taken office.
Yes, they have, because I read the documents, and the list of the board members are there. So I would expect that they would carry out their duties. And even if they are new, I mean, we are a reasonable institution here, and we conduct our business very fairly, very democratically, and very openly. And if the chairman of the board had come and indicate, look, we are new, and there may be some questions we may not be able to give you full answers for, we would understand and appreciate that. That's not a problem. But you can't send off your management and you stay home. Anyway, I want to ask you two big questions. One is about finance and the other one is about jurisdiction. I'll ask you the jurisdictional issue first, which is that I read your mandate and it's pretty comprehensive. And when you yourself, Dr. Prince, outlined the responsibilities of the institution, you talked about the fact that one of your responsibilities is to make sure that the consumer is well served. And does that mean, therefore, and I think from what I read, I understand it to be so, but I would like you to clear it up for the public. Does that mean that TATT has a responsibility to ensure that the service providers of any of the services under your jurisdiction, and that would mean telecommunications as well for TSTT and for Digicel, that service is provided at the topmost possible quality that technology would allow for consumers of Trinidad and Tobago?
Chairman, my direct answer is yes.
Okay. So I would ask a question that really has to do with consumer interest. If you drive along the Butler Highway, you would find that your telephone, I have a B-Mobile telephone, so I find that I am not able to make a call because the Wi-Fi or whatever is necessary for me to make my phone call is not allowing my phone call to go through. Secondly, I would find that if I'm driving and I'm talking to somebody, the call would drop. Now, this used to happen some time ago. I thought the matter was fairly well corrected because we had decent service from both entities, and it is happening now again. Are you in a position to explain why it is that we have these frequent drop calls and this inability to make a phone call outdoors in the public space?
Chairman, you should not have the frequent drop calls because cellular go from cell tower to cell tower.
That's what I understand, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So therefore, when you're leaving a cell tower, the other cell tower should pick up your call.
Yes. But what is the issue then? Why is that happening? You know that that is happening?
I know that that is happening. I suffer the consequence.
What is the issue?
The issue is the service provider not providing the service properly. It all resides with the service provider.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with the consumer.
What authority do you have to insist that the service provider provide the quality that is expected by you and by the consumer? Do you have any authority with regard to that? What is it?
The concession we give you, it states in there the kind of service you should provide. So we do have authority.
But if you were to tell TSTT, for instance, that we are having problems with the service to consumers, this is the nature of the problem that we are having, what allows you to ensure that the service provider corrects the situation and does what is required?
Chairman, Parliament, to give us the right to sanction them so and so, as is done in a lot of developed countries.
You do not have sanction powers now, is that correct?
No, we don't.
Okay. And that, so part of the authority you require as a jurisdictional authority over these matters would be the ability to impose sanction if service standards are not met.
Chairman, they tell us clearly and precisely, you can't do us anything.
Okay. All right, so that's one issue. The second issue I want to deal with is the finance. And I thought your answers were clear on the other question. Can you, based on the information here, and based on the information you provided in terms of monies being directed towards the consolidated fund, could you explain to the public at large what is the financial state of your institution? And I will have a couple of follow-up questions for you.
The financial status of the institution. Go ahead.
The authority, if I may, Chair,
yes,
is considered a going concern. We have an obligation under the Telecommunications Act, Chapter 4731, to ensure that any surpluses that arise at the end of each financial year are directed to the consolidated fund. As such, the authority is self-financing. We collect fees from concessions and licenses, and we ensure that our expenditure is maintained within the budget provisions that we have available. But in all instances, we are self-financing, so we are not a draw on the consolidated fund, or we do not also have subventions as well.
It's a going concern, and you're providing profits to the Treasury, to the consolidated fund. And basically, you said that you can actually make more money if you are given the kind of permissions that you need in order to the authorizations for the 700 spectrum. So that is good. But the follow-up question I have is that you've had some problems from our point of view, based on the information that we have seen, with internal audit and problems in terms of engaging the Auditor General. You've done pretty well because you brought the accounts up to date. The Auditor General has seen your accounts up to 2016. So we find that good and promising. But we did not get the internal audit report until this morning, and we had asked for a number of. This one's 2014? It's more status, yes. We did not get something until. There seems to be within the organization a problem of managing the audit function and some perhaps controversial issues around the management of that function, so that the taxpayer and the government, as the state representing the state, can get what you might call proper accounting from TATT and be satisfied that all is well. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And what is the challenge? What is the problem? And how can we solve it?
Thank you, Chair. The Internal Audit Department of the Authority commenced operations at the same time as the authority started back in 2004-05. And we have had a manager internal audit for a number of years. In around 2013, the board at the time decided that they wanted a little more work done and some knowledge transfer to the internal audit department. And we went through a process of recruiting a firm to assist the internal audit department with their work. The firm at the time was Kpmg. So we entered into a co-auditing arrangement back in around 2013 with Kpmg for a number of years to ensure that we had the skills in the internal audit department to get the work done, and to ensure that the internal audit activity was done at the standard that was required. So I would say that our board and our staff, our employees, you can certainly rely on the information that you have before you, because we had both Kpmg at that time and for a number of years, plus the work of the internal audit department. We also had the Auditor General doing work during that time as well. And so the combination of all of those ensures that the financial statements and the financial information before you is one that is at the required standard.
As of now, if I understand you correctly, as of now, you feel that whatever deficiencies you've been able to manage, and you're really at a situation where there are no corrective measures to be taken, you feel that the institution is okay in terms of its accounting practices and its auditing, internal auditing function. Did I understand you correctly?
Yes,
okay. I wonder if I can ask the Auditor General's representatives here to say something.
Good day, Chairman. The Auditor General's last report was for 2012. 10, 11, 12. 13 to 16 were done by private auditors. We are currently finalizing the 2017 and 2018 accounts. Now, there's a little interpretation issue with the Act, because Section 57 talks about the accounts being public accounts. And Section 2 might have said we can authorize a private auditor to do the audit, but Section 3 talks about being public accounts again. And the Auditor General, Mrs. Otley, Mr. Ali, the interpretation was that we keep the accounts because the public accounts are not generally contracted out. That's why we kept the TATT accounts in our portfolio, trying to bring them up to date as best we could. Now, we hope to report in the 2017 and 2018 by the end of this year, this month, and the 2013 accounts by the end of next year, January. Now, we are trying to manage a 50% deficit in staff and auditors at our department and keeping these accounts up to date. Other clients we've been able to maybe subcontract to private firms, but because of the interpretation of Sections 57, 1, and 3, we didn't see it wise or fit to give it out. With regards to the opinions on the current status of the accounts, we have management letters that were issued on the 10, 11, and 12 I believe they came to the committee. The management letters for 17 was issued last year, December. We recently got the financial statements with signatories to process them, and the 2018 management letter will be issued within this week. So we still say there might not be major issues, but there's still concerns that the Auditor General has.
Okay. But you are saying by January of next year, they will be up to date in terms of audited accounts for all outstanding accounts up to 2018. Is that what you're saying?
By next year, the 2018 accounts will be audited by the Auditor General, and 17. The 13 to 16 would not have been audited by us, and we would be looking at them again.
Okay.
Because the way the Act is phrased, we wouldn't want to put any committee of Parliament in a jeopardy, because it's strange that this is the only statutory board that has that claim that these accounts are public accounts.
Okay. All right. I understand you. I appreciate it. I will open the floor now to other members. I'll start with you, Mrs. Gopi-Skoon.
Thank you very much, Chair. Now, members, whenever I'm looking at an organization, there are 5 Ps that I tend to be guided by, and that is the clear purpose of the company, the product that they deliver, the procurement projects, and the people, and I'll start with the people. Now, the chairman spoke about coal dropping, etc., and so on. I just want to direct my question specifically to the people of the rural areas. Many of the people, there are still people in this country who are not benefiting from telecommunication services in terms of internet and mobile connectivity. Could you speak to that for me? Where are the gaps, and what is the intention? What are the projects? Why are the service providers still not providing to particular areas? As I said, the gaps and what you intend to do about it. Is there a mandate when you provided the initial contracts to provide to all of Trinidad and Tobago?
Minister, well, what you said there, we had a problem, for example, in Tobago, in terms of access to telecommunication services. We did an audit to find out the gaps, and we engaged the current providers to ensure that the services are provided where we found that the services were in want. Because, Minister, if you look at the concession of these service providers, when you have a national license, it means that to provide services to the entire Trinidad and Tobago. It doesn't mean providing services to Port of Spain. So therefore, like I said before, our problem is what is our, let me use the word, big stick to ensure that they do it. And knowing that we don't have that kind of enforcement mechanism, they tell us straight to our face, well, you can't do anything. We know we breach our concessions, but what can TATT do? And to be honest with you, TATT can do sweet little, but have a meeting with them, tell them, look, you're doing this, have a meeting. They promise us they're going to do it, and of course, they don't. And that is the kind of catch-22 situation we're in.
Let me just ask you again. So Tobago is the only location that is not provided. What about the southernmost, the northernmost?
No, you have Trinidad. You have places in Trinidad where we get complaints that they do not get service. So we applied the same method. We applied the same method of moral suasion. And maybe moral suasion would work with the central bank, but it's not working with telecommunication providers, because the central bank may have, things they can do, but we don't. Parliament never gave us.
But surely the contract must provide for breach.
Chairman, if I may,
Go ahead.
through you, to speak to the treatment of these access gaps that you have in terms of the provision of telecommunication services. Whilst the telecommunication providers afforded to provide service nationally, in some areas it is uneconomic to provide those services. And the legislation, the Act, makes provision for what is called a Universal Service Fund, which can be used by the authority to ensure that service is provided in those uneconomic areas. To this extent, what the authority has done, and this was over the period in question, 2010 to 2016, we have done 2 digital divide surveys. This is to identify the locations, both within Trinidad and Tobago, where you have deficiencies in terms of access to telecommunication services. And with those surveys completed, we have information that we can use in terms of using the Universal Service Fund. And for this fund, we had our regulations to allow us to implement the fund approved in 2015. And since then, what we have done was to identify projects that would be suitable to service those access gaps, as well as service marginalized persons. For example, one of the projects that we're pursuing is to provide assistive technologies to persons with disabilities. Although this is not a geographical access gap, but it's a geographical social gap. Another project we're doing, and this is in collaboration with the ministry, is to provide Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi in certain public spaces, for example, national libraries, public waiting areas, in hospitals, as well as transport hubs. And the third initiative that we're planning right now is to look at pilot projects where we can have universal service, which is primarily today both voice services as well as broadband internet access provided to marginalized villages or locations in Trinidad and Tobago. For example, in South you have that area by Mon Diablo, which is deep South, and you also have in central Trinidad, this is in the Tamana Range area, a village called Brazo Venado that has very limited connectivity, and it's based on that uneconomic cost to the providers. And this is where we hope these universal service projects will come in to fill those gaps.
So there's an established fund?
Correct, yes.
And what is the quantum of that?
Right now, that
40 million.
The fund now stands at 120 million.
120 million. So obviously, a priority would be to put in place projects to cure the gaps that have been identified. Where are these projects? What are these major projects? If you could identify your top 3 for me, how you're going to execute these, what are your timelines? And because we really want to give assurances to all of the people of Trinidad and Tobago that these kinds of services can be made available. So give us details on the top 3 and the execution. And I noticed that the project management is really left to your departments. And then I understood, when I read, there was some gaps in terms of the being able to complete projects on time and so on, within the scheduled time and so on. And there was underspending by the statutory authority, by the TATT. So I'm concerned that you are leaving these projects up to this in the departments. This is what you've said in your answer to some of the questions. What other, do you have a monitoring and an evaluation unit? Because you need to fix your execution of these projects. But let me take you back to my question. What are the priority projects to fix these major gaps, to be able to feed all of the people of Trinidad and Tobago?
Chair, through you again. The projects that I've identified, which is the assistive technologies to persons with disabilities, the free Wi-Fi access in public spaces, and we have a pilot project to close the access gap in specific villages based on the digital divide surveys that we would have conducted. Those are the three main initiatives that we're undertaking currently. We've significantly done work in 2 of the 3 initiatives. This is the assistive technologies, the persons with disabilities, in terms of even in collaboration with the Ministry of Social Development as well in identifying those individuals. And the intention is in this financial period to be in a position to actually implement that project. As you can see, there needs to be a relationship between us and the institution responsible for identification of these persons, which is, from our understanding, the Ministry of Social Development. So that project is well underway. In terms of the free Wi-Fi access in public spaces, we have amendments to the Universal Service Regulations that hopefully should go before Parliament in this parliamentary period. And that would allow us to implement that initiative as certain modifications were required to the current Universal Service Regulations in order to implement this initiative based on the scope of it. And in terms of the final project, this is something that we're planning to undertake in terms of the planning period or planning stage for this financial period. So hopefully between the next year and a half, we will see that project go towards approval and then thereafter implementation.
You'll find that the third project, which is
Yes.
the one that they proposed, which would
Yes.
necessarily be a better service for many
Yes. Yes.
Sorry, with regard, maybe I should repeat myself, with regard to the third project, which is to provide a service to particular rural areas, which you have identified in your gap analysis. I would like to know, for the sake of the public, what is the start date and the end date to that particular project? When will you deliver?
So,
Chairman, our Chairman, Senior Counsel Gilbert Peterson, has just arrived. And I just wanted to make a point to both you and Minister Gopiskun. Look at the dichotomy, Chairman. AT&T breached the Constitution. FCC had the authority to charge them $50 million US, right? South Africa, the same breach, 25 million rand, right? So you understand, Chairman, when I told you about the our inability, to take, decisive action when there's a breach of these things. You didn't do this, you didn't provide service in one of these areas, in Rancho and these areas. The raw thing is that, and the service providers, they tell us what that could do. Especially, I don't want to call service provider name, but there's a particular service provider. Say, boiler can't do nothing. Yeah, we know we breach. Boiler can't do nothing.
I appreciate it. There are 2 important issues that you raised that I've taken note of. One is that you require authority of cabinet for being able to deliver on the 700 spectrum. That's the first issue. And the second issue I took note of is the fact that you have no powers of sanction to insist on compliance or to enforce any powers that have to do with compliance to ensure that the consumers are properly protected and serviced. So I've taken note of that, and that will be part of our report. We would take. I may ask you some more questions on the issue of the spectrum. But I go on now to...
No, but Chair...
You have a follow-up question?
Chair 2, you didn't allow me. I didn't get an answer to my question.
Okay.
And from the Technology and Engineering Executive Officer.
I think what you want, did you want the identification of the communities? Is that what you were seeking?
No, I want to know when the project will be started and when the service will be delivered. And he's prepared to answer, so if you can allow him.
Okay.
Chair, I just would like to clarify an issue regarding the authorization of spectrum. That will not require cabinet authority.
No.
It's this aspect of concessions, that is what will require cabinet authority, and it's receiving attention of the legal arms of the TATT as well as the Solicitor General's Chamber. Thank you.
That's all.
Huh? Were you saying something?
No, it sounds like the course of action that would be necessary.
Okay.
It is actively being followed at this time.
No, but what is the authority you require to give you freedom to act on the 700 spectrum?
Can I ask yes,
Mr. Chairman, good morning. If I
before you go, I want to take the opportunity to welcome you, Chairman.
Yes.
And I thank you for responding and coming down here.
Yes.
I appreciate it. And since at the beginning I said I was disappointed that the board was not represented, I give you the opportunity to say what you wish to say now.
And I'll be able to assist with the 700 question.
Yes.
First of all, let me apologize for not being here. For two reasons I had not been here. I had a professional commitment that I could not get out of because it was booked. It's a court fixture that was booked before. And secondly, I was under the impression that the PS was summoned from the ministry, and I had intervened and insist that some members of TATT accompany her so that your committee could be assisted. We did not interpret it in any way that the board was required to be, otherwise we would have been. And no disrespect would have been intended. Had we recognized the invitation was to the board, I would have been here for sure, and some members of the board. So I just want to make that very clear. And
we accept your...
And I know the chairman would not attribute to me that I would, the chairman knows me.
Okay.
Secondly, the issue with the spectrum, the 700 spectrum, Mr. Chairman, is the reality is, as the PS was saying, that the Solicitor General's Chamber is involved to some extent. What it is about is that previously there was an RFP that went out with respect to a third mobile provider, and lumped with that RFP was an assignment of 700 spectrum. And because of the plan that existed at the material time, only 2 providers were catered for in the 700 spectrum. If there is, and it is being considered that if there is a change of spectrum plan, then there would be sufficient 700 spectrum for all players. The issue that the Solicitor General would be attending to now would be whether in the currency of that RFP being out there, whether we can proceed to award 700 to 3 players when previously the invitation and the RFP had envisaged 2 players, and that's the issue. So once that is clarified legally, and we're given the all clear legally, then that 700 would be expeditiously dealt with.
So the issue is really a legal stumbling.
It's really a legal stumbling block because of what had gone out historically with the RFP that is in limbo, so to speak, at this point, with respect to where we can move.
Okay. Yes. Appreciate it. Understood.
And on my way here, I was listening to the channel, and I also would like to say something about the underserved areas.
Yes.
I know that there was an immediate focus on Tobago, but there are other areas that are underserved. But the issue and the reality is a matter of economies of scale. Although concessions may be given to providers, it may be uneconomical when one tries to roll out service in particular areas. And tied into that would be our Universal Service Fund, which is quite substantial. And you may be aware, I'm not sure, through the legislative agenda, that we need regulations and rules with respect to accessing the Universal Service Fund, which is intended to assist in providing service to underserved areas. And that is being attended to. Those regulations have been drafted and sent forward, so we hope in quick order that areas that will not be economically viable for the providers to traverse because of the economies of scale, that the Universal Service Fund could assist the providers in providing services in those underserved areas.
Okay, so let me understand you so that listeners and viewers understand, which is that you have a fund, but you need clear rules and regulations to be able to tap those funds for the purposes of developing underserved areas.
Yes, we need amendments to those rules to access those funds. The fund is quite substantial, and we need to access it in order to best provide service to underserved areas.
Understood. Yeah. Okay. You still have a question?
No, that answers that partially answers my question, but I went on to ask about the project management within the organization, just to ensure, yes, the fund becomes available, the legislative action that is required is taken. I am concerned with their scheduling of contracts and so on, that their system is just via departments. I wanted to know whether or not there's a margin and evaluation unit, and also just generally, that's my concern. And I think Member Sukram is about to respond.
Okay, could we conclude this part? Go ahead.
Chair, through you, and to be concise, we have started the planning work on that third universal service project already. That's been identified as a key deliverable for the authority under our performance management framework. So that has oversight not just by the department responsible, but also the senior management team as well as the board of the authority, who we report to in terms of our performance towards that, towards our key deliverables, and who monitors our performance towards those key deliverables twice a year, mid-year, mid-financial year, and then, of course, at the end of the financial year. And this year, we've carded for this key deliverable to complete the planning process, which will spell out the entire process and these associated schedules and timeframes that will be applicable for the planning, the identification of locations, the procurement in terms of contracting service providers, and then thereafter the implementation by those said service providers and use of the fund.
Okay.
So you don't have delivery date as yet, but all of those.
We're in the planning stages for that third project. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Senator C. Prasad.
I was looking at the Kpmg report. Sorry, I was looking at your Kpmg report, and one of the things that struck me was the number of areas that they noted that were at risk. We're talking about IT, financial management, accounts receivable, governance and strategic management. And I was wondering two things. What is TATT doing to deal with these areas? And at this time, how do you measure your rate of return on your investments and to ensure that you're getting value for the money spent by the organization?
Thank you. The Kpmg report was intended to identify the key areas that could potentially have risk in an organization. And certainly, in any organization, the areas of highest risk would be the areas that deal with the financial management of the organization. So that report was meant to be a guide to us to identify the areas that we need to concentrate on to ensure that we mitigated our risk. And certainly that report assisted us in making sure that the elements of risk that were identified at that point were dealt with within the various departments. In terms of the authorities' work in risk management, we have continued to do that, and as we've identified in the report, each department is required to identify their risks, and that work is done together with the internal audit department. And once the risks have been identified, there's a requirement to have a plan in place to deal with those risks.
And so reports are done to the board monthly or quarterly, depending on your reporting structure, and it's dealt with at the board level?
The risk reporting is normally dealt with at the audit committee.
Which then reports to the
Which would then report to the board.
Okay. I just have one follow-up question. I was looking at your accounts receivable, because it's all well and good to have a lot of income, but what is being done to manage your accounts receivable? You know, are you taking legal action, etc.? And there's a cost to having bad debts, because you would have provided some sort of service and not received the income that is due to you.
Within the authority, we take the management of accounts receivable very seriously. In fact, as identified in the response to members, We actually have what we call an arrest committee, which is a committee that includes persons from different parts of the organization, all who contribute to the work that is required. And that group meets every 2 months, and we track all the income that is required, that's meant to be coming into the authority, that hasn't yet been received. In addition to that, we do monthly reports, and we do updates to the board every time they meet. And so we have a report that goes to the board every time they meet that identifies the major areas, what work we've been doing, and what the intention is. If we have specific cases that we want the board to deal with, those cases are dealt with as well. And in fact, we have been able to bring our receivables down from the levels that they were before. In fact, we were reporting fairly substantial reductions in the current financial year. And in the instances where peers or operators are delinquent, we take action, as you know. We take action against them. We've had one major case in court against a television provider some years ago, and we also take action against current operators as well, so that once the authority takes action, we have had results coming as a result of that. So we do take our arrears very seriously.
Senator Tahaka.
Thank you, Chairman. And I welcome the Chairman of the Board. I have a few questions regarding the financial aspects of the operation of Telecommunications Authority. And I just want to make one comment to solicit a response to start with regard to a report, annual report, albeit not before this Parliament, so I can't say which year. But it indicated that $5.6 billion is the size of the contribution to GDP of the telecommunication and broadcasting sectors. This is a report of the Telecommunications Authority, albeit an audited financial statement. But it has to do with a market report you all conducted, market survey you all conducted, which is about 3.8% of GDP of Trinidad and Tobago at that time. Is it that you all have put forward any policy proposals, given the many protestations of Dr. Prince, who is well lettered in economics? Any proposals to advance the issues and challenges you'll have regarding getting more teeth and so on, given the size of the sector that you'll oversee?
Thank you very much, Member, for the question. There are amendments that are presently being drafted. Some of them have been drafted and already forwarded to find its way into Parliament to give us more teeth. Because we need, as a regulator, we need teeth. But you know that the modern approach to, in many jurisdictions with respect to regulating, particularly the telecommunications sector, is whether you use the strong-arm police type approach or whether you use the more persuasive approach. And we are seeking to get teeth in the amendments, but how we implement that regulation or the power we would then have under the amendment, we will probably like to adopt the more international approach of some persuasion, but at the same time reserving your power and your rights to be more draconian if you need to be.
I want to ask a follow-up question regarding this, but I guess it may be better directed at Dr. Prince. In Trinidad and Tobago, based on the report you had about 13% of the usage is in terms of the income generated in the sectors is from pay TV, all right, operations. Have you all looked at the opportunity to export, or do you all regulate in any way productions that are done here that are exported overseas? For example, we are familiar with the Nigerian Nollywood, Indian Bollywood, Hollywood. Do you all in any way regulate and contribute to export of the telecom and broadcasting sector?
You know, some years ago, we had a highly successful television series which had reached as far as Jamaica. What was the name again? That series, not the one, please.
Is it Westwood Park or Calabash Alley?
Westwood Park.
Okay.
Right, had reached far. But you know, You know what is the holdback? Very talented actors, good production, but our problem is the cost of local production, of the cost of producing those things. We can't compete with television stations buying a package from abroad. Our cost of production, as they say, is a little too high.
I want to get, thanks for the submission. I want to get to the finances now. Now, I believe a response from the manager of finance and accounting stated that the size of the Universal Service Fund is in excess of 120, 130 million, which in fact I saw in that report. I can't say the figure I saw because, again, that is not before the Parliament properly. That means that over 60% of the assets under your management are held as cash, based on what I've seen. Is that desired, or is there something you all plan to change about that? And I ask that with regard to the fact that I've been looking at the organizational structure presented to us, and in finance and finance and administration, I'm seeing varying proposals in terms of a 2009 structure, a proposed structure, and different proposed structure with no date attached to it. So it begs the question, especially since we don't have properly before us finances, what exactly is the current state of the staffing in the finance and accounts department?
Okay, if I may, Chair, could I start with the first question, which was regarding how we keep our assets? We are required under the Telecoms Act to maintain the balance in the Universal Service Fund only for that purpose. So it can only be used for universal service projects that have been approved by the board and by the minister. So that means that those funds cannot be touched until we actually commence using them for those specific projects.
Can I interject just before you go to the staffing? But then, you know, it goes, surely, I think you would agree with me, it goes totally against the grain of any finance professional, which is my background, to hold funds as cash. Surely there should be some opportunity to advance a proposal for better management, if not of the entire fund, but at least of some part of the fund so you get better returns, which could improve your bottom line.
Chair, and we certainly at the authority agree with that, but our Telecoms Act does not allow us to have investments. As a matter of fact, what we tried to do, we approached the Ministry of Finance to see whether we could be able to do maybe perhaps risk-free type investments, but we have not been able to be successful in that regard. But what we have done is in the amended Act, we have included in there, and once it's approved by Parliament, the ability to make risk-free investments. And once that is passed, then yes, we'd be able to have the funds work for us in the way in which proper financial management is expected.
I don't think anyone can disagree with that. Now, the second part of the question, which would really be the end of my contribution, really, what exactly is the state of the staffing? Because once I don't see financials before me, I get worried, and then I have to go and look for it in other places. Do you have properly staffed chartered accountants? I see there are different positions: accounting officer, accounting technician, regulatory accountant, manager, accounts and finance. Do you have enough? Are you sufficiently staffed with chartered accountants in the authority?
Chair, again, if I may, the authority has quite a number of chartered accountants. Within the accounting department, we have 2. In the procurement unit, we have 1. In the internal audit department, we have a further 2 chartered accountants. So we have in total perhaps up to 5, and some who are also training as well. So in terms of professional capability and skill, the authority is well versed in that and sourced in that area, resourced in that area.
Senator Henry.
Yeah. Morning again, everyone. I must say that my first comment is that it's quite refreshing to have an entity here that is not a drain on the Treasury. I think this is my 9th year in the Senate, and this is probably the first time that we have had any such entity that is not seeking a subvention and so on. So that makes my morning already. But what I'd like to find out, in terms of the issues Dr. Prince raised with the ability to impose sanctions and so on, could we, as this committee, get an idea of some of the other issues that we could take forward and make recommendations in order to help the authority become what you think it should be in terms of having the effectiveness that is required to carry out a proper mandate?
Thank you, Member. I think what we can, the amendments to the legislation will give us some teeth. We presently do have powers of enforcement, but they're a bit tedious because we'll have to go to court. I think some of the examples Dr. Prince referred to, like the FCC, they can almost, summarily almost adjudicate and rule and enforce penalties, but we will have to take the entities to court, so to speak, and that we know once you put something into the court system, and if someone is in breach, it's in their interest sometimes that you take them to court because they know they can continue whilst you seek to enforce, because it will be such a protracted process. So some of the legislative amendments are going to help us with respect to enforcement, but we also have, which is not something we would like to do or something we will do likely, if you're in breach of the terms under which we have granted you the privilege to serve, and you're in breach of those terms, when time comes up for renewal, the fact that you have been in breach of previous terms and conditions given to you is a factor that we think that we can take into account in determining whether we renew the privilege once more, or the license, as the case may be.
Any other challenges that the committee should be aware of in general that the authority is facing that they would like to expose or comment on?
Members, I'm being told by my team, regulations. We know a lot of those are in the pipeline. A lot of those, in fact, the minister has been driving the legislative process. She has involved me as the chairman to get in the operations part of getting the regulations done. I've been monitoring the legal department of TATT. I've been pushing them. In fact, they have been complaining about the strain I've put them under. But a lot of the instruments have been prepared and forwarded to CPC. I think I'm bad with acronyms, I think CPC, for onward transmission to Parliament to have the amendments done and the regulations passed, the broadcast code, we have drafted all of that, and all of those things are in the system. So we think that once we get those instruments approved, we will be and have an improved authority with respect to enforcement and discharging our mandate.
Senator Tahaka, you had a follow-up question.
Yes, thanks, Chairman. This question, I guess, could be fired, Chairman of the CEO, is regarding the sector that you all oversee, all right? And if over roughly 6 billion TT is accounted for in terms of productivity, do you all have any information, because I didn't read that report in its entirety, do you have any information on the number of jobs that this sector supports? And also, if there's an opportunity for you all to aid UE, UTT, COSTAT, USC in their program development, and as well whatever TechVoc facilities we have in Trinidad and Tobago, probably the NSC, in terms of skills development, curriculum development as well, if those opportunities are available to you. So the number of jobs that you have estimated in the sector, and do you all get an opportunity to help with national development in education?
If I may, based on PARSEC information, we don't know the exact number of jobs at this time, but certainly that's information that we agree we could actually start to collect and make available to you.
Just to interject, we'll be grateful if you can supply it to the Parliament, because that will help definitely.
Okay. And then in addition to that, you asked about TechVoc and education and UE and COSTAT. What we have done in the past is that we have given out bursaries on occasion to students of UE and UTT, particularly in relation to when we did our Girls in ICT Day projects. So we provided encouragement for women to be involved in the ICT sector by providing bursaries. We have done that. In addition to that, we have been doing work to identify programs within journalism programs, communication programs that the authority could support together with the broadcasting sector, and that is currently in the pipeline. Thanks.
Okay. A couple of, you wanted to say something, Dr. Prince?
Yes, Chairman. Just wanted to add something that there's in the pipeline the National Statistical Institute of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
And one of the areas early we have for examination is the contribution of telecommunications to the GDP of Trinidad and Tobago using big data.
Yes. Well, this is a critical area. In fact, my follow-up questions were about that kind of thing. So I'm glad you raised it. And I suspect what you are talking about is how you could arrange for the CSO to tap that data. Is that correct?
Well, it would not be the CSO again.
Yeah, well, the new institute.
Well, the new institution, what we can arrange, we're trying to use, if we use what we call basically sample data, we know that we're not going to get secondary employment and secondary contribution. We're not going to get that properly done, because telecommunication and IT, they go into industry, they help the industry to make money. And in other words, how do we account for that, right? That is something that is, you know, giving us a little bit of headache. How do we account for that?
Well, I think it's something that you have to help to resolve, because it's really critical, and I'm going to use my opportunity for some follow-up questions to engage that. I mean, when we started off the discussion, you talked about the importance of GATT and how early we had gotten into the game with the first 60 countries in the world, etc. And the whole value of all of this in relation to GATT is because all business and their capacity to grow and expand and to access what the world has to offer in terms of markets and in terms of opportunities is really based on our capacity to manage our ICT system and our telecommunications order, right? And therefore, that is why TATT is such a critical organization, because you stand basically as the, what can I say, the mediating power in terms of the telecommunications and ICT capability in order to allow for business competitiveness of the country, Trinidad and Tobago. And when I hear what you are saying about the 4G, and when I hear what you are saying about the when I know what I know about the ICT sector, for instance, in the last Auditor General's report, the governmental system was flagged in terms of ICT deployment, use, connectivity, etc. And both the Ministry of Planning and the Ministry of Public Administration, which you had, were flagged as being critical to this process. Now, You yourself, when you started, Dr. Prince, you said that, you know, the country is being left behind. And we know what has happened in terms of some of our competitiveness indicators, whether it's ease of doing business, whether it's the level of competitiveness, whether it is innovation issues, whether it is ICT deployment and usage. How can you, as TATT, play a role in getting the players that are critical to undergird this competitiveness capacity of the country to play the role they have to play to make that possible?
Chairman, thank you for the question, because I want to remind Senator Henry that the law of competitive advantage does not exist no more. We have now a law of technology advantage. This thing about competitive advantage, if you have X resource, and you know, it doesn't exist anymore. So therefore, what we as a regulator, what we have to do is to ensure that we provide for you know, enough spectrum, because UE, I remember in 2006, UE said, we want spectrum to do research, right? And they wanted their spectrum to do their research. And we had to give UE spectrum. If we held back that, it meant that we were holding back the economy.
Yeah, they would not have been able to go into the deep research.
Yeah, exactly. They wouldn't be able to go into that. Because I remember Prof. Julian coming to us and say, listen, you can't charge us for spectrum to do research in the university, you know, because when we do research, it benefits the entire productive sector, right? And he, as you know, Prof. Julian was very, very, very heavy on technology, right? So therefore, we are looking at how do we move competitive advantage from resource to technology.
Yes.
Right? Because there are certain countries who don't have resource. You know what they have? Technology, chairman. And chairman, they're beating countries that have resource.
Okay, but could you, I mean, how do we get to the point where we basically release this spectrum opportunities, leverage it, and get to the point where we can have our ICT and telecommunications system at the level where that technology will allow us to leapfrog in terms of industry, in terms of capacity of our public service and so on, integration of all of these things to the benefit of the consumer and benefit of the markets?
Chairman, nothing, you know, I look at Southeast Asia, and they did it, you know, by using a system they call STEM, right?
Yes.
The system they call STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM, right? So therefore, we would have to start working a lot more and a lot closer with the university.
Well, with the system, yeah.
Yeah, to create that kind of system, that kind of integration, right? Okay? Because unless, Chairman, we look outside it and we say we have 20, 30 boats to export things, we're in trouble.
Okay, I understand. We're going to ask maybe the final question.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add, I think part of the answer to your question is a national ICT plan, which I understand has been approved recently, probably 2 or 3 months ago. And it's a matter of rolling out and implementing that plan. And that ICT plan, together with natural resources, should be able to take us to the level that Chairman is referring to.
Yeah, you see, the thing about that is that you're right, there are many pillars, but the three key pillars are the technology pillar is the key, business, government, tertiary level education, or in fact your education system as a whole. And unless you mesh that, unless you integrate that, you're not going anywhere as a country. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. A quick one, quick closing question, asking for your comments. A recent CARICOM heads of government meeting with a focus on the CSME, and one of the major objectives being a single ICT space. Just some comments from you on that.
They do not accede to the ICT space given by the ITU. They do their own thing. Trinidad, we are in Region 2, CARICOM and all of them. And the only country that accedes to Region 2 specification is Trinidad and Tobago. Right? And this is why we can move from one spectrum to jump to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other. They would have great difficulty in doing that.
That might be so, but it means then that Trinidad and Tobago has a leading role.
Yes, I remember. I agree with that. I think, but I think the debate. I was heartened to hear that at the CARICOM meeting recently, because I know for the last 2 or 3 years the debate has been that regions, especially CARICOM region, need to have one ICT space, and I know that there had been a lot of meetings with the other CTU. Right, that's it. I'm very bad at acronyms. CTU, with respect to achieving that common ICT space, because they recognize that that is the way forward in order to maximize the benefit that could be achieved as a region from ICTs. So I know that that is on the agenda, and it has something that has been foremost in discussions in the ICT sector.
And if I may add, Chair, through you, one of the key areas of in that space that we're seeking to harmonize throughout the Caribbean is spectrum, in terms of how is spectrum used, as well as what technologies are considered, and having it harmonized throughout the Caribbean. So when investors are looking to invest in, let's say, telecom providers and such, looking to invest into providing telecom services using spectrum, they can look at the Caribbean as a unit as opposed to each country individually.
Okay. Question, when are the regulations likely to come to Parliament?
When are the regulations?
Okay.
Actually, the Universal Service Regulations are before the LRC at this time.
Okay, so.
And the Telecommunications Bill and Policy, we are just awaiting a response. It's coming very soon from TATT, because we have been collaborating. The legal division, technical divisions with the ministry have been meeting with TATT.
Okay, so and when, maybe I should ask the chairman this, what about the legal issues with regard to
the 700
yes,
issue?
Yeah.
I was promised an opinion as recently as it's supposed to be this week. It was promised last week, but I'm told it will be, I'll get it by the end of this week, and we have a board meeting on Monday. If I get that opinion on Friday,
you can then
should be able to address it on Monday to have a way forward on that.
All right, thank you, because that gives us, sort of specific time regions that we can think about. I want to thank you very much for coming and for being here. Chairman, I want to thank you for taking the trouble to come down here and to be with us. And we did, in fact, issue an invitation to the chairman and the members of the board, But we move on from that, but I'm glad that
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I wasn't aware that we got a direct invitation.
Okay. And, but we proceed here now in good faith. There has been some, I think, useful information provided here for the general public and for us. Senator Lester Henry mentioned earlier the fact that at least you were in the black and you were contributing to the consolidated fund, which is an important thing. And the documents indicated to us that you have not been receiving subventions for over a decade, which is significant.
Mr. Chairman, if I crave your indulgence, on the wire when I was coming, I think I heard Dr. Prince say that we had contributed 14 million last year. I thought that was an error because I remember signing a check for 30 million, not 31.
Yes.
Yes, so that should further hearten Dr. Henry to see that it's double what he thought it was.
Okay, so I think that was some good news. I think the problematic issues in terms of the organization has really been the evolution of the relationship with the Auditor General and the problems with internal auditing and internal audit reports. If you would pay some attention to that and try and bring it up to speed, I think that would strengthen the organization considerably and give us here certainly a lot of comfort. The heartening part of that is that by January, you are going to have your audited accounts up to 2018 well done and completed and before Parliament. So I think that that is also good news. The other issues are the developmental issues having to do with spectrum, having to do with the powers and of enforcement and insistence on compliance by TATT, and basically creating the conditions in which the country can use technology, leverage technology to be more competitive. I don't want to underestimate the value of that last one. I don't think we have a chance in the world, in this part of the world, unless we can leverage that technology. And you are critical to that process. And I think that the issues that we have to do with the consumer, whether it is the marginalization of the consumer and bringing them into the net, which you can attend to, whether it is ensuring the quality of access, which we now have a problem with, or ensuring the big picture issues, which is how does the country really make the grade to become extremely competitive in this very competitive world. I think that has to be a little more conscious of its role in that and help the key stakeholders, even if one of those stakeholders is the parent ministry or the government itself, to appreciate and understand what has to be done to take advantage of the technological opportunities. Because as you yourself said, we cannot be competitive without this leverage and without making the best use of this leverage. And I just want to say that I have found I've found you in your engagement of the committee to be very forthright and straightforward, and I appreciate that. And you also gave us information that I think is valuable, not just about the development and evolution of TATT, but the state of the industry, although we tended to focus mostly on the telecommunications sector rather than the others. And you have also given us a little insight into some of the challenges we face as a country developmentally, competitively, by not making some of the decisions that we need to. It is heartening also that we are going to regulation and legislation to correct some of those things. So I find that very positive. So I want to close basically for thanking the Auditor General's Department for being present and for making their contribution. The Ministry of Public Administration, we're very heartened that you are here and you made your interventions as you thought necessary. And the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, we're glad that Dr. Prince was here. And Senior Counsel Gilbert Peterson was here also as chairman to elaborate on some of the issues and to answer some of the questions. And all of you members of TATT and members of the Public Administration Ministry, we thank you very much. We also thank the media for being here and for covering today, and we hope that you will, as the intermediary, as the bridge, make sense of some of this information for the population at large on the things that really matter to them. And we thank you very much. I thank my members, of course, for always being a good team and a good committee as they generally are. Thank you.